Our approach to providing support, ethics support, at Fraser Health is all about capacity building. Whether we're helping people to make difficult choices at the bedside somewhere, wherever that bedside might be, whether we're helping a team to develop a policy, a practice guideline, a strategy, a system level decision at a boardroom somewhere, or whether we're helping an individual or a team to work through a really challenging experience they've had as part of our moral distress support. All of these things and all the education we do, it's all about capacity building. And what we mean by that is that we believe in order to navigate some of the really challenging questions that we all face every day in our work and even at home, we need ethical literacy. And this set of videos, this set of resources starts to articulate what we mean by ethical literacy and what capacities we need to develop to actually build that strength, that ability to navigate effectively through the choices that we make every day. To help understand what we mean by ethical literacy, it can be helpful to have a story or two in mind so that we can put these ideas sort of on hangers, to help them make sense better. So I'm going to tell you two stories. One is a clinical story. Imagine that you're a nurse in a hospital and you have a patient who came in because they have something wrong with their digestive system. Maybe they had an internal bleed or something like that, and they came in because they needed that internal bleed looked after. They also have some mental health and substance use issues, and they're housing insecure, meaning they have no stable housing. They were basically homeless before they came into the facility. So they're in your hospital, they're on your unit, and you've looked after their medical needs. The bleed is looked after and it's stable. And it's time to discharge them. The problem is that there's no discharge destination that's going to be able to meet their medical needs as well as their needs related to their mental health issues and their substance use. How do you deal with that? Especially when you see that the patient may be trying to manipulate the system to get a drug dose that they like, and maybe in a setting that's not very safe for them. And when you look at the way that the physician, the most responsible physician looking after the patient, you look at the way that they're dealing with the patient and you say, gosh, it seems like they're just wanting to do what the patient wants and not really doing what's required to keep them well in the long term. How do you deal with that kind of situation? Or to take a completely different story, imagine that your car has broken down and it's time for a new one, or at least you got to deal with your transportation issues. What are you going to do? Are you going to rely on public transport? Are you going to buy a new car? If you're going to buy a new car, you're going to buy a gas-powered car or an electric car. If you're going to buy an electric car, are you going to buy a Tesla or another brand? How do you decide? Well, from our perspective, to navigate these kinds of questions, these ethically challenging questions, we need ethical literacy. So what is ethical literacy? Well, in a nutshell, ethical literacy is about our thinking process. How do we actually work through the problem we're dealing with in an intellectual level? Ethical literacy is about our character, the kind of people we are as we engage these stories and the different relationships in these stories. And ethical literacy is also about our emotional intelligence, our ability to understand and process our feelings, the feelings of others, to work with people as we solve these problems. But we're going to offer a more rigorous definition and approach to thinking about ethical literacy that actually breaks it down into a number of different components, 5 or 6 different components. It starts with understanding what an ethically salient situation looks like. How do we know when a situation is actually really important that requires bringing the skills of ethical literacy to? So that's the first thing. After that, it's about moral reasoning. Thinking critically about values, what should matter, about facts, what's actually going on in the story, prioritizing what should matter, and then problem solving in a way that allows us to get to practical solutions to the questions that we're facing. So that's the second component, moral reasoning. The third component is going to be character development. Understanding, what does character actually mean? How does courage play into the decisions that we make? How does the way we understand what it means to be in partnership with other people mean to us? What does our character look like? So that's the third thing that we're going to point to. The fourth is what we're going to call pluralism, or a disposition to difference. When we work with someone, I'm the nurse working with the patient or with the doctor, and they're different than I am in important respects. How do I understand what my commitment to difference is, what my attitude should be to difference, and what skills do I have to work with people who are different than me when we're dealing with something that's really, really important? The next component is understanding moral traditions. We live in a place where we come from backgrounds that have specific moral traditions, whether that's a faith tradition or whether that's a tradition of practice. For example, healthcare, medicine in specific, you might say, actually has its own moral tradition with its own goals, its own ends, its own excellences. And we need, if we're going to operate in these environments, to understand what are the moral traditions that are actually at play and maybe coming into tension as we, or in the issues and the situations that we're trying to find our way through, negotiating. And then there is this idea of ethical leadership. So a really important component of ethical literacy is understanding when it's the case that we are in positions of power or influence, how we use that to create spaces for good, inclusive experiences of decision making, to try to bring focus on the common good, to advance the well-being of the people we are responsible for. So ethical leadership is its own domain within ethical literacy. At least that's what we're going to propose. So at Ethics Services, from our perspective, each of these different domains of ethical literacy require their own skill set, knowledge base, personal development. And for each of these, we want to set out a set of learning goals that folks can follow, and we want to create opportunities for growth that the people we serve can actually engage to strengthen their ability in that particular domain. And the last thing I want to say at this point is that we are all on our own learning journeys. We are all ethically literate to some extent, and we have a lot of room for growth. If you asked me to do this, to talk about ethical literacy 5 years ago, it would probably have looked very different than the kinds of things I'm saying about it today. And I hope in 5 years from now, if you ask me, my perspective will have changed a little bit. Hopefully I'll have a bit more wisdom about it. But the point is, we're all on learning journeys, all on journeys trying to strengthen our ethical literacy. Our hope at Ethics Services is to meet you wherever you are on your learning journey and to support you in your unique specific situation to strengthen your own ability in these different learning domains, to help you move forward in your journey of building ethical literacy.